Action.
Hello, my name is Jackie Geringer McDermott, and we are recording live from the English Valley History Center in North English, Iowa. It is January 11th, 2025. This diary or journal was written by my great-great-aunt, Mary Elizabeth Claypool Wade, who was known as Libby Wade. Here is a picture of Libby. This is when she was younger and then when she was older with her brother. She was my grandmother's aunt and the matriarch of our very, very large family. Libby lived a half a block east of Main Street in a little house on Oak Street in North English, Iowa, until near the end of her life in 1959. She was 71 years old in 1946. I don't remember her, but she knew me as a baby. Downtown North English was also the center of my life as I grew up. I would like to introduce you, page by page, to the cast of characters from North English, Iowa, and the surrounding English Valleys area. April 1st, 1946. Mary R. was here, also Bertha and the two little boys. Heard of the death of Roy Reed in Cedar Rapids yesterday. Funeral here tomorrow. Jenny bought me a pan of dandelions for gleans. Very warm today. Had a letter from Milan. You might remember that Milan Cray is Libby's grandson from Texas who was in the service. Mary Regseger is her friend and the neighborhood egg lady. She's the younger person in this picture. Bertha was her niece, my paternal grandmother, Bertha Geringer. And the two little boys were Chuck and Ronnie, the two youngest ones in this picture. They were not in school yet in April of 1946. Roy Reed that she talked about, who's having the funeral, was a friend who used to live in town. I found two articles on him. He was only 47 years old when he died, and he'd been back staying in North English with his mother, Gertie Harris, trying to recover from an operation the past 2 years. He had cancer. He was the son of Robert Reed and Gertrude Caliph Reed Harris, so therefore he was uncle of my North English friend, Linda Reed, because her father, Glen or Toonie Reed, was one of Roy's brothers. Harry Reed was another brother, the father of Jim and Trudy Reed. My friend, an accountant from Williamsburg, Stephen Rose, would be a great nephew to Roy Reed through his grandmother, Imo Reed Miller. My Geringer cousins in Texas, David, Kim, and Carrie Geringer, are also related to Roy because their grandma, Lorna Reed Harris, was a sister to Roy Reed. Jenny that I talked about, who brought her a pan of dandelion greens, was the wife of her oldest son, Wayne, who lives a block south of Libby. Libby said that Jenny brought her the dandelions for gleans. Gleaning means gathering the leftover crop from the field to be used. In this case, the dandelions were growing in Jenny's yard. Some uses of the dandelions would be, according to Google, food. Dandelion greens are edible and can be eaten raw or cooked in salads or soup. Medicine. Dandelion has been used in traditional medicine in Europe, North America, and China. Dye. The flowers from the dandelion can be used to make yellow dye. Glue. The latex from the dandelion can be used as glue. I'm guessing that Libby either used the dandelions for greens like a salad or for something like dandelion jelly. April 16th, 1946. Roy Reed's funeral was today. Warrens drove Russell's car. Judy stayed here. Hattie stopped a while coming home from the funeral. Mr. Holton and Sons began work on a garage here. A nice warm day, a little shower. The funeral for Roy Reed was in the Methodist Church. Warren or Mike and Lena Wade were her son and his wife. They drove younger brother Russell's new car to the funeral and left preschool-aged Judy in the front here with her grandmother Libby. Hattie Newberry Killian is her 55-year-old neighbor who had returned to North English to care for her elderly mother, Clara Newberry. Mr. Holton was J. Elvin Holton and Sons, and his sons were Otis Holton and Milford or Slim Holton and Marvin Holton. They were carpenters who built and remodeled homes and garages. Here's a picture of one of them. This is Slim Holton or Milford. Evidently, Russell has decided that he needs a new garage for his new car. Wednesday, April 3rd, 1946. Several degrees colder in the morning. Russell was sick again today. Verdi, Jenny, Mary R., Carrie Wade, and Mrs. Newberry were here today. Jenny went to Minneapolis to visit Dolores. Neva Cray came from Texas on a bus. Very high wind. The men poured cement for forms for the garage. Russell was Libby's 38-year-old son. Libby lived in the house with him. Verdi McKinstry was her friend. Jenny was her daughter-in-law, the wife of her son Wayne, or Perky Wade. Jenny's sister was Dolores Butterball Lawrence, and she lived in Minneapolis. Mary Regsager was her egg lady, neighbor, and friend. And then Carrie Wade, who they talked about today, was a cousin of Mary Regsager's, and she sometimes came from Wellman to stay with Mary. Her maiden name was Long, and she was originally from the Green Valley area east of North English, too. She was an aunt to Bessie Dennison, so she would have been a great aunt to my Aunt Shirley Dennison Geringer. I'm not familiar with Carrie Wade, although she lived until 1981. I did a little quick research in the North English record, and it turns out that some of the relatives attending Carrie Wade's funeral were Pauline Reed, my school teacher, and the mother of my friend Linda Lee, who we just mentioned earlier, and the Keith Jordans, who were grandparents of my buddy Don Jordan, and Max, Marcia, and Mike Wade. Marcia, you knew I would mention your name one of these days. Marcia Wade Vincent of Lena, Illinois is one of my faithful listeners and childhood lifelong friends. Do you see how everyone is related to everyone around here? Back to today's story. Mrs. Clara Newberry was her elderly neighbor and friend. Here's a picture of Mrs. Newberry. She's on the right-hand side here. The women were likely sewing or visiting or working on lodge work or church work. Neva Cray was the sister-in-law of her daughter, Anna Wade Cray, from Texas. Neva later married a man named Lloyd Burdine and lived in a little green house on Boland Avenue when I was a child. She was the mother of Johnette Cray Hudson, who later lived in Keswick and had several children with the last name of Hudson. And Johnette's sister was Dorothy Cray Blount. April 4th, 1946. Still windy and colder. 3 degrees at Des Moines in the morning. Belleville was here in the PM. Also Mod C. Heard the temp in Iowa City got down to 29 degrees. Finished the dresser scarf Hazel gave me. Belva Yoss was her married granddaughter. Her husband Don Yoss, this one is Belva up here in the top on this side. Her husband Don Yoss had just returned from the service, and they are expecting their first son, Mick Yoss, later this spring. They are residing with her parents, Wayne and Jenny Wade, a block south of Libby. Maud Foster Claypool was the wife of Libby's nephew, Ray Claypool, and the mother of Amy Claypool Hervey, who later lived at South English. The temperature lowering to below freezing could potentially be very hard on the spring foliage. Hazel Wade Cobb was Libby's married granddaughter. It sounds like she had given Libby a dresser scarf to do fancy embroidery work on it for her. April 5th, 1946. Iron today. Hope I can soon get my washer. Neva and Neva here in the evening. Some windy and some warmer. Russell not feeling well. Doesn't eat. Neva said Carl Johnston's are in Texas. Back in the day, clothes were ironed, were sheets, dresser scarves, and just about anything made out of fabric. Evidently, Russell and Libby had been talking about purchasing a washing machine. Before this, the family likely washed everything by hand and perhaps had a wringer to get some of the water out of the clothes. This is a picture of a 1946 Maytag washing machine. The one we had in the 1960s looked like this. You fill it with water, and then the agitator works to clean the clothes when you plug it in. To rinse the clothes, you set up tubs of water and a wringer. Then you put the hose in the drain to drain the machine. Ours in the 1960s had an electric wringer, and we set it up in the basement over a drain. Two women named Neva were at Libby's house today. Neva Cray, who was later in life named Neva Burdine, had just arrived from Texas. Neva Morse was her friend from church and later the grandmother of the Bursler kids from North English and a great-grandmother of my friend Tina Widmer from Deep River. Here is a picture of Neva and Charlie Morse and their grandsons, Gary and Billy Morse. This is more as I remember them looking later in life. Neva Cray is telling her that Carl Johnson and his wife Daisy Cobb Johnson and their daughter Geraldine or Jerry Johnson, who later married Don Van Dee, were in Texas when she was there. I remember Carl and Daisy. This is a picture of Carl and Daisy. And Jerry, their daughter. This is Jerry. They told me about their family moving to Texas for a while when Jerry was in high school, but I don't remember the details. They came back here later and ran Don and Jerry's Cafe uptown when I was in high school and I worked for them. April 6, 1946. Cloudy in the morning. Marlene Newberry was here to collect for the paper, first week. Mamie Burkett mowed our yard. Churchill's sold their cafe to Bruce Smith and a swink. Hattie here. Army Day. Lots of planes went over. 28 in one group. Marlene Newberry is her paper girl. Marlene is the 14-year-old granddaughter of Clara Harper Newberry and will be the bride of my Uncle Marvin Geringer in the 1950s. Mamie Burkett is a high school senior who has moved to town to live and attend school. Very shortly, she will be married to my Uncle Glen Geringer, who has returned from the service and is running a gas station uptown with my Grandpa John Geringer. Hattie Newberry Killian is her neighbor and lodge friend. Lowell and Henrietta Churchill were the parents of Joanne Churchill Harris, the mother of my friends Nancy Harris Achenbach and Mary Harris Ott. I found a newspaper article that they sold their cafe to Bruce Smith and Don Swink. I don't know who Bruce Smith was, but Don Swink was the father of my friend Vicky Swink Ayers and her brothers Larry Swink and Jack Huber and their sister Donna Swink. It says, Lowell Churchill sells cafe to two local vets. Don Swink and Bruce Smith began operation of the business on Monday. Churchill quits after 13 years. Lowell Churchill, who has operated a restaurant here for nearly 13 years, last week sold his business to two World War II veterans, Donald Swink and Bruce Smith. The new firm name will be called S&S Cafe, and the two men took possession Monday morning. Both Donald and Bruce are graduates of North English High School, and both were employed by local places of business before entering the service. Don Swink served with the Army in the Pacific, being wounded near Munda Air Base early in the war, after which he returned to the States. Bruce Smith served many months in the 16th Evacuation Hospital Unit in Africa, Italy, and France. Mr. Churchill has no definite plans for the immediate future other than taking it easy for a while. I Googled about the Army Day that Libby was talking about, and I found this. President Harry S. Truman proclaimed Saturday, April 6, 1946, as Army Day to honor the soldiers of World War II and other wars. He invited the state governors to issue proclamations to observe the day. Truman also addressed the country on Army Day, calling on citizens to support the Army and to alleviate the hardships of soldiers separated from home. And here is a picture of the B-29s flying over Chicago that very same day that Libby was watching the planes in the air in North English, Iowa. April 7th, 1946. Hattie stopped as she came back from the cafe. Jerry Geiger is quite sick. He thought soldiers were after him last night. They took him to Bill Ballard's. Russell and George Kincaid went fishing. Russell hauled junk in the AM. About P. Rife in the paper. He died Friday evening. Jerry Geiger was an elderly retired businessman in town and the father of Dr. U.S. Geiger. He was related to the Ballard family and to the Geigers who live in this area today. Russell was her 38-year-old son who lived with Libby. His nickname was Towler, and he loved to fish. I don't remember him as he passed away in 1964. But Glen Cobb was his nephew by marriage, and he said Russell was just the best. Pete Rife was a neighbor of the family when they lived in Parnell before they moved to Cedar Rapids. Libby might be reading about his death in the Cedar Rapids newspaper. Monday, April 8th, 1946. Mary R. was here in the p.m. Russell went to Cedar Rapids, came home at 4 p.m., sick again. Cold. Warrens are moving today. Judy, Suzanne, and Marcia were here. Jenny came home from Dolores's. Warren Mike Wade is her second son. He and his wife, Lena, are moving to a different home nearby. Jenny is Warren's 5-year-old daughter, and Suzanne is Libby's 3-year-old great-granddaughter. Here's a picture of Mike and Lena Wade. Marcia Hogendorn is the neighbor girl the same age as Suzanne. Here's a picture of Marcia and her husband Jack Rat. Marcia's the same age as Suzanne. Libby was babysitting the children. Jenny is Libby's daughter-in-law. She's the wife of Wayne Perky Wade. Her sister Dolores lives in Minnesota, and Jenny has been visiting there. April 9th, 1946. Heavy frost this morning. Temperature 32 degrees. Ronnie C. and Jimmy Robiu spaded a little in the garden yesterday. Too cold today to be out there. Jenny was here, and also Maud. Russell's a little better. Lodge tonight. Mary R. was here, and I bought eggs. Ronnie C. was Ronnie Claypool, the grandson of Libby's cousin Wallace Claypool. He and Jimmy Robiu were town kids looking for a little work. Jimmy Robiu was the brother of Jean Harris, the mother of my classmate Jan Harris Stevenson, and her sister Barb, and her brother Rick Harris. Jenny was her daughter-in-law, of course, and Maud was the wife of her nephew Ray Claypool, and she was later the mother of, well, she already at this time was the mother of Amy Hervey from South English. Russell's her son who lives with her, and Mary Rakesegger's her egg lady. On April 10th, 1946, Warren and the girls were here until Lena went to lodge last night. Jenny and Suzanne, too. Russell is better today. He went up to buy a maid hag tonight. Hattie was here. She had heard they took Ed Pope away. I was at Bursler's a while this p.m. Still cold and cloudy. Warren is her second son, and his girls were Phyllis and Judy. Jenny is the wife of her oldest son, Wayne, and Suzanne is Jenny's granddaughter. Burslers were her friends and neighbors. Ruth Bursler was the daughter of Clara Newberry, her friend. April 11th, 1946. Lena and Judy were here, also Suzanne and Marcia. Mr. Graham and Cassidy brought the new Maytag in the p.m. Had about an inch of snow this morning. Temperature 20 to 32 degrees, as given on the radio. The snow was all gone a little afternoon. No damage to the fruit was reported. The fuel oil barrel was filled. Lena was her daughter-in-law, and Judy was Libby's granddaughter. Suzanne Kurtz is her great-granddaughter, and Marcia Hogendorn was Suzanne's friend. Mr. Graham was the owner of Graham's Hardware, and Mr. Cassidy worked there. The family uses fuel oil for their stove. April 12th, 1946. FDR died a year ago today. Heavy frost again last night. Russell went to Cedar Rapids today with Mr. Warner. I was over to Verdi's a while. Ruth, Betty, Wayne, and Becky Shaw were here in the p.m. Hattie was here as she came from work. Rebecca Convention today at Victor. It was here a year ago. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR, was the president who died in 1945. Mr. Warner was Ellison Barnes Warner, and we're looking for a picture of him. He was the manager of the home lumber company where Russell works. E.B. Warner was the grandfather of my friends Mary Warner Cunert and Betsy Warner Pilkington. Ruth Mall and her daughter Betty and Wayne Shaw brought the newborn child Becky to see her great-great-aunt Libby Wade. And here's a picture of the mother, Betty Shaw. Hattie Killian was her neighbor and friend from Lodge. April 13th, 1946. Nice out today. Ironed in the AM. Ronnie came and we planted some garden in the PM, the first we have planted. I talked to Beth by phone. Ronnie Claypool was a school-aged child who was assisting her to plant the garden, and Beth Mall Holmes was Libby's niece, the daughter of her sister, Sarah Myrtle Claypool Mall. Beth lived in Kyoto and was a great help to me when I started working on family history in the 1970s. April 14th, 1946. Russell removed the forms for a cement foundation in the AM and went fishing in the PM. I went to the hall to help get it ready for the big day. John and Louise and Charlotte and Richard and Delmer were here a while after I got home. I gave Charlotte a pearl pencil that I had. It is Ralph's birthday. Louise Claypool Long was Libby's niece, the daughter of her brother Benton. Louise was a sister to my grandma Bertha Geringer. Louise's husband was John Long, and their younger children were Charlotte, Richard, and Delmer Long. Ralph Claypool, that she's talking about, that it was her birthday, was her nephew, Ralph Claypool. He was the adopted son of her brother Henry Claypool and his wife Daisy Ma Claypool. Libby liked to remember birthdays, as did my grandma Bertha Geringer. Ralph was a World War I vet, and he had passed away in 1936 at the age of 37 of a disease that doctors later determined to be Huntington's chorea. Beth Mall, who was Libby's niece and Ralph's cousin, had letters from doctors at the University of Iowa who studied his case, as his children were also affected by the disease. You might remember that Russell is building a garage on the property and that he loves to fish. Libby is going over to the hall on the second floor of the brick building at the end of Main Street, at the corner of Main Street and Oak Street. According to the North English Record newspaper, the Rebecca Lodge, of which Libby is a member, will be observing its 50th anniversary next Tuesday evening. Invitations will be mailed to out-of-town lodges and Rebecca dignitaries, and it is anticipated that a large crowd will be present for the occasion. That's the end of the diary portion for this week. The History Center has been in the possession of the diaries of Lib Wade for quite a few years now, as they were a generous gift from Glen and Hazel Cobb since Libby was Hazel's granddaughter. I went through and read most of them once. I had planned to try and copy and distribute them somehow. The late Lana James helped me, but it was a hard task since they are bound books with no way to quickly copy them. Then I thought I might index them so that they could be deciphered by researchers in future years, but again, that was also an almost impossible, tedious task. So in October, Dave Jackson and I were talking about it, and I said I would just like to read the diaries on YouTube so that if anybody ever wants to know about them, it would be there. Dave said, why don't you go live from the History Center? And so I started doing that on Saturday morning coffee time at the center. That's the people you hear talking in the background are people that are here for coffee. Well, then it was winter, and Dave hit a deer, and people were sick, and then I went to Florida for a week, so there was not a lot of whole organization about how topics will be presented each week. I sit down through the week at night and type up all the pages of the diary to read aloud, and then cross-check the week back against the North English Record for that week in 1946 to see if there's more to add to the story. And then I hunt on Find a Grave and on Ancestry.com to look for pictures or find some in local reference books that I have at home. I was not asking others for help in advance, but I now see that it was needed. I need to announce the topics in advance and ask others for their input. Also, my knowledge was mainly of town people, whereas Bonnie Romine and Carolyn Elwood are good resources about information about the Green Valley area east of town, and Scott Romine knows a lot about the Kinross area and more information on current residents. I myself have not really lived in North English since I was 25 years old. I have lived in Webster, South English, Watshire, Sigourney, Deep River, and Belle Plaine, and worked in Williamsburg, but I have not resided here for 45 years. Reading these diaries aloud and doing these broadcasts has opened another whole can of worms of people I did not know personally, or I have not even heard of, such as Libby's friend Bertie McKinstry. So if you have any pictures to add to a topic that I'm talking about each week, or stories to share, please send me a message. Dave Jackson contributed these additional pictures of Opal Ballard Beorkrem Grove. Dave has written a book called Why Don't You Take Me to Hinkletown? The History of Hickory Ridge School in Hinkletown, Iowa. For those of you that do not know, Hinkletown is east of North English and then south of the highway, and Green Valley is north of the highway. Opal Ballard was the daughter of John Newton Ballard Jr. and his wife Bertha Riffle Ballard. Opal was born on July 5th, 1920, near North English, Iowa. She was raised in the Hinkletown area and attended Hickory Ridge School and graduated from South English High School. Her siblings were Eunice Ballard Polton, Rena Ballard Summers, May Ballard Grove, Ruth Ballard Rachi, Ralph Ballard, Floyd Ballard, Dorothy Ballard, Elsie Ballard, and Iva Ballard Ewing. After her father's death, Opal's mother raised the children. Her mother, Bertha Ballard, will be a spotlight in the future, so if you have anything to share about Bertha Ballard, please contact me. Opal was married to Eldon Beorkrem and raised 4 daughters, and they owned Eldon's Food Market. After his death, Opal married Joe Grove and resided east of South English. After Dave Jackson moved to this area about 30 years ago, he started to unearth the history of the land that he had moved to in Hinkletown. He started digging up all the bricks on the acres he had purchased. He found maps and history books and a history of the Hickory Ridge School. He found me, and he also found Burl Brenneman of Taos, New Mexico. We were both genealogists that knew some things about the interconnections of the families in Iowa and Keokuk County. And then he met Glen and Hazel Cobb, and he met Opal Ballard Beorkrem Grove. Dave organized gatherings for alumni of the school at Hickory Ridge to gather and tell the stories, and collected pictures and stories into this book that he wrote. Opal wrote the story of her own birth family, which we will cover in the Bertha Ballard story. And here's a picture of Opal at the 2002 reunion. This is the remaining alumni from Hickory Ridge School gathered at Hinkletown in 2002 for a class reunion. Pictured are, in the front row, Blanche Maria O'Rourke Dermody, Dorothy McCune Thomas, Opal Ballard Grove, Murray Hall Jr. In the back row are Karen Goody White, Margaret Goody Christie, John O'Rourke, Marjorie Hall Goodman, Earl Hall, and Kenny Donahue. We also have a big storyboard that I'll show when we do the Bertha Ballard story. Here's a picture of Opal with the storyboard, and it's all about her parents' family. In this one, this is Elsie, Opal, Ralph, and Iva Ballard with newly hatched ducklings. Opal is the little girl in the front. The children all attended Hickory Ridge School, and Opal attended from 1926 to 1935. And the other picture is Opal Ballard Grove as she visits the old coal shed at Hickory Ridge School in 2006. We also have this one, which is a picture of Opal with her older sister Eunice Polton, their mother Bertha Ballard, and Opal's sister Ruth out at Hinkletown when they lived there. And in 2005, they brought the reunion to town to the North English City Park. Approximately 50 former residents attended the event, and the former students in this picture were Cecil Long and Joyce Martin Molander in the front, and in the back, Kenny Donahue, John O'Rourke, Opal Ballard Grove, Blanche O'Rourke Dermody, Dorothy McCune Thomas, Margaret Goody Christie, Karen Goody Lackor, and Herb Moore. The next story we're going to talk about is Art Carter. Art Carter had a dairy route. According to an article written by Carl Hogendorn in the 1954 Centennial book, North English always had a good dairy center. In the early days, J.W. McCoy started the first dairy business selling milk to the public. Mr. and Mrs. Warren Thomas and her sister, Kate McCracken, also engaged in delivering milk. The milk was hauled from house to house in a horse-drawn cart. The milk was distributed from a milk can with a long-handled dipper. When the milk bell rang, the housewives rushed out with a pan or a pail to get their daily supply of milk. In later years, many others engaged in selling bottled milk to the town. Milo Stover, Jess McCalla, Frank Knipfer, and Dale Lown. The town was supplied milk from a modern dairy started by Arthur Carter in 1950. I found advertisements starting in 1946 from Carl's newspaper, the North English Record. No town in Iowa can boast a more modern equipped dairy than the Sunray Dairy, having equipment to pasteurize and homogenize milk. It was delivered in sanitary bottles or cartons daily. And here's a picture of Art Carter and his wife Mary Alice, and the story from the North English Record from that week in 1946. Art Carter, in this issue, is announcing the opening of a pasteurized milk and cream route in North English and South English. He will begin house-to-house delivery on Monday, March 11th. Carter is an overseas veteran of World War II, and he will use the firm name Sunray Dairy Products. He also plans to deliver chocolate milk. And my biggest thing that I noticed on this, that the quart of milk was 12 cents, and those little half pints of chocolate milk were 5 cents. Correspondence, etc. from July 11th, 2025. Janet Cobb Woodhouse writes, I was so interested in the mention of Uncle Glen Cobb's discharge from the Navy. He served in World War II. Here's a picture of Glen and Hazel. He had the mumps when his unit shipped out, so instead of Norfolk and Guantanamo Bay, Cuba was where he served. I was proud to be his guardian on the honor flight to Washington, D.C. I learned he didn't think he deserved it since he didn't serve overseas. Family members had a difficult time convincing him of his eligibility. We had a wonderful day on the honor flight, and lots of North English friends and some family were at the Cedar Rapids airport to greet him that night, including Les and Nancy Williams, who drove him home. I also heard from Vicki Orndorff Johnson. She wrote, I watched the January 4th broadcast on YouTube today. It was very interesting. I was in grade school with Susan Beorkrem. Alice Floring Stramer writes, all the people you mentioned have been household names as we grew up. Good people. I'm glad to know how each is related. I didn't know Jackie had so many relatives in North English. I can hardly wait for more information on Glen and Hazel Cobb's family, Robert, Glenn, and Mary. Also, the next alumni lunch for English Valleys will be February 24th, 2025 at 11:30 a.m. at Bryant's at the Williamsburg Mall. Please contact Alice or Linda Holden Carter if you will be attending. I also heard from Connie Holden Hanna. She said, I am enjoying the names and recalling the memories of my hometown. Thanks, Jackie. Mark Claypool says, Jackie, another week of outstanding work. I love going down memory lane, and it certainly warms one's heart to place and picture the people of yesterday and how they made us who we are. Andy Weber said, yeah? Andy Weber said, once again, thank you very much for everything you have done to put this together. I enjoy this very much and look forward to next week's program. I also heard from his sisters Peggy and Cindy Weber, who are regular listeners. I heard from a couple of my classmates who are regular listeners. Sandra Holton Wiseman said, hi Jackie, I've seen your posts and I'm really enjoying them. Many old names, locations, and events from our community that I forgot about. What a great trip down memory lane each week. Thank you. Diane Bonneter Castens from Lanark, Illinois, writes to say that she would like me to mention my mom's side of the family. Hint, she's on my mom's side of the family. I will be having 3 features very soon on these families. Dave Jackson just walked into the room and he brought something I want to show you, since we're talking about it. This is a picture of Glen and Hazel Cobb from when he was in the service. We're talking about him arriving back home right now at this time in 1946. And we also had somebody walk in here this morning with the acquisition of the week. The person that walked in here was Mick Lortz from Millersburg, and this is an advertisement for the Farmers Savings Bank in North English. It's really beautiful. We've set up a channel on YouTube where the podcast can be watched, and that is easier than hunting on my Facebook page for the broadcast. So far, we've had over 300 views on YouTube. They are archived by the date of broadcast. We invite you to subscribe, like, share, and tell your friends. Subscribing to YouTube is free, by the way. We will also continue to be on Facebook each week. Funding for the History Center comes from Iowa County 100 Plus who care and the Iowa County Community Foundation. However, we welcome your donations to keep the heat and lights on. Please send donations to the English Valleys History Center, P.O. Box 70, North English, Iowa 52316. Scott and Bonnie Romine are working on a set of programs for 2025, which they are going to announce really soon. Scott Romine has posted a schedule for the alumni reunion at the History Center for during North English Fun Days on Saturday, July 26, 25. At 10:30 is the main parade. At 11 o'clock, North English Church's food tent at the city park and other places to eat around town. The EV History Center alumni schedule to meet and greet friends and classmates starts at noon for the classes of 1950s and 60s and before. At 1 p.m., the classes of the 1970s. At 2 p.m., the classes of the 1980s. At 3 p.m., the classes of the 1990s. At 4 o'clock, the classes of the 2000s. At 5 o'clock, the classes of the 2010s and laters. They'll possibly have school building tours from 1 to 4 p.m. Snacks and drinks will be available at the History Center, paid for by sales from the Everyone in EV book for 2025, with pictures of all the graduates since 1957. I will be doing a live broadcast before the parade at 9 a.m. and staying around after the parade to visit. We are also interested in learning about historical English Valleys items that you might wish to donate to the History Center. Please contact Dave Jackson, Scott Romine, or any board member to donate. Next week's topics will be Bertha Ballard and the history of the History Center. So long.